Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we're getting wilder by the minute. It's a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. For season 2, we are diving into Blazing Saddles. Schweizes Meshuggah a minute at a time. I'm your host. I'm Alan Sanders.
I am Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us again, fresh off their sleepover, hanging out with us here in the Old West for a couple of extra days, we have returning guests Sean German and Dave Pallas. Welcome back, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us. This has been fun, real fun.
Yeah, thanks for letting us stay over, although I think you will want to have that couch fumigated.
Well, that's the way it works. You get the pizza boxes out, you start playing some D&D, you start going through some of the old movies, people crash, they fall asleep whenever. It is
Well, I think it was the not so much the pizza and the D&D as the cookout we had Saturday night and the beans around the fire. That, really did us.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to see, does it hold water? If you drink black coffee and beans all day, what's the result?
Yeah, I think that myth is confirmed.
Well, I know I felt it. Did you feel it?
I felt the rumbling.
Yeah.
There's going to be a great story coming up later this week from Burt and Gilliam about being a new actor and not really knowing the difference between pantomime and thinking you really have to do things.
It's called acting
and
for a
apparently
reason.
After about the fourth take, he said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And Mel goes, you don't actually have to fart.
Yeah, it's like,
but we'll save that for later in the week.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, so here, but for minute 41, we're still with our Indians and our chief.
Yes, so let's go ahead and tell you we're back here with Mel Brooks dressed up as the chief, or certainly the most decorated member of this war party, as the addressing both Bart and his mom and dad, speaking in Yiddish, a combination of English and Yiddish. And we will end this scene with the aforementioned belching around a campfire with a plate of beans and some bread. And we'll give you kind of a little snapshot of what that's all about before we wrap up today. So let's go ahead and dive into this, guys. We were talking about the mishmash of Yiddish and English. When we last left, the last thing we heard him say was, no, Schweizes Meshuggah means don't be crazy. He was telling the other two braves around him, don't hurt these folks. They're okay. So what we start with is this cry to the heavens where he says the line,
Laws him gain!
Which means let him go.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, so I grew up, I do not speak Yiddish, but some of my older relatives, I grew up with a little bit of Yiddish around the household, my grandparents and great aunts and uncles. And I did take a year of German in college, and Yiddish borrows heavily from German. So if I couldn't translate, I could at least make out the words for most of this. This bit I had to look up. I had no idea what he's saying. That Loisengane, the way he says it, like this grand pronouncement that he's announcing. I guess he's speaking up so all the other tribesmen, the entire Sioux Nation needs to hear this, so they know that they're letting this one wagon go.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's doing. It's a combination of giving us the sense that he's almost saying some loud prayer or some kind of calling to the gods or to the fathers that went on before him. But it also does, when you look at the translation, let him go. It's, hey, don't anybody harm this family. I am allowing them to leave unharmed.
Well, I think you wrapped it up.
And thanks for that was a very short minute. And come on back tomorrow.
Well, so I don't have anything to add on that that individual line, but I do notice. So then we switch back to English, and this English is just as puzzling to me as the Yiddish is, because outside of this movie, I don't think I've ever heard the phrase "cop a walk." The ways "cop a walk." It's all right. Is that a saying? Is that even, is that maybe something from the 70s? I don't know. Have you ever heard someone say cop a walk?
Well, I think when you cop something, it means to adhere or to take, like to cop an attitude, right?
Yeah, I've heard that. Okay.
So he's telling him to cop a walk, go ahead, take off, get out of here.
Okay.
To take hold of or to pick up, take
yourself a
on
go.
Whatever. So take on my direction, get out of here.
Ah.
Cop a walk.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, get your wagon and go. Yeah. Okay, now I get it.
There you go. So cop a walk.
Well,
that's all right.
I got to be honest. I always just thought he was speaking Yiddish. Yeah, I never even really paid attention to it being a. I wasn't really paying attention. I mean,
So you thought cop a walk was Yiddish, huh? They're not speaking English, as far as I'm concerned.
That's what we like to hear from our host. I wasn't really paying attention.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, I guess I was kind of breezing by what he was saying, and I just assumed he was still kind of in Yiddish. So, see, I learned something.
Yeah. Well, I think you confirm something I said last minute, which was, even if you don't understand what he's saying, particularly the Yiddish parts, you get the gist of it. Mm-hmm. The manner he's speaking, the tone of voice, the body language kind of tells you the way he's considering this family, and that he's not a threat. He doesn't see them as a threat. He's not a threat to them. He's going to let them go. And you don't even need to understand the words to know what's going on there.
No, you don't.
Even if they are English.
Even if it's a mishmash. It's sort of this hybrid smashing together of English and Yiddish.
Well, I was just going to say that's sort of on point for Yiddish. I mentioned having taken some German in college helps me understand some Yiddish. Yiddish is kind of it's kind of like Spanglish when you have people that from Latin America or Spanish speaking countries. They Spanish is their first language, and they come to America and they're surrounded by English, and they end up using sort of a mix of it. And I have friends who would call it Spanglish. I don't know if that's an official term or not, but sort of just a mix of Spanish and English, and Yiddish is like that as well. It's spoken by Jews from Europe. It kind of borrows from Hebrew, but then it's also got German and other languages from the areas where the Jews were living. So to mix it, it would be natural if you had a tribe of Israel, a lost tribe that made its way to North America, that they would mix in the Hebrew and the German and some English and some Sioux Nation, and it would all kind of mix up. I don't know, I guess Creole is maybe a term for a mix of languages like that. So to throw in some English is...
Oh yeah, Creole is definitely a mishmash of French and Caribbean, and it's that whole kind of almost the same, synonymous with like the voodoo speak.
Yeah, so Yiddish
in
is that kind of language or dialect. So for them to throw some English in as well is on point. It's on, it's consistent with the language. So go ahead.
Well, look, we're gonna have to let the term Spanglish stand, because any movie,
well, yeah,
Adam Sandler aside, that has Cloris Leachman in it, is okay by me.
Absolutely. So it's all connected.
And since Cloris Leachman was in the Adam Sandler comedy Spanglish, came out in 2004, we'll let that one slide.
So
that was actually a movie.
You didn't know about the movie Spanglish?
And no, I would say that I have not ever heard of that classic.
Written and directed by James L. Brooks. Come on. Long lost brother to Mel Brooks. No, just
you didn't have to say, just kidding, because I would have bought them. Like, oh, sure, they're in show business. That makes sense. I would know.
One makes good movies and one made Spanglish, whatever that is.
Well, no, come on. You know who James L. Brooks is, don't you?
The Simpsons.
The Simpsons?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Are you backpedaling, or are you just
No, I know who James L. Brooks is. I mean, I've been a Simpsons fan since season 1.
Okay, good. Because, I mean, you were kind of making him sound like he was bad.
Well, now I question everything that he made a movie called Spanglish.
With Adam Sandler. Yeah.
I'm like, were the first 14 years of The Simpsons really good? Yeah, well, Adam Sandler, that may be part of the issue.
Look, Adam Sandler, Teo Leone, Cloris Leachman, it's worth watching.
Well, I
Okay.
and I'll let that
We'll
just die
take your
right
word
there.
for it. I
Closely
think you're talking to three people who have not seen this film, but we'll take.
I just look at Spanglish and then I look at, what was it called? Outland?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd rather watch Outland.
Well, I would
Like,
rather you watch Outland. Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Like, I remember seeing the trailer for Spanglish. I was already like, no, thank you. Just no.
Okay,
thank
you were a
Adam Sandler,
90s
no
movie go. So this was a 2004. This is Adam Sandler trying to recapture his
Yeah.
heyday, and it didn't really work.
Yeah.
But
No.
you didn't remember this movie at all?
I saw the trailer and I think the million time I was like, yo, is there another Spider-Man movie coming out? Like, that was me. Yo, get this off the screen. Put Spider-Man back
Oh
on.
my gosh.
Put Spider-Man back on. You're yelling at the camera guy. You put the wrong movie in.
Look, I'm gonna look at 2004 movies. What was I watching? I was probably watching The Village. I was watching Collateral. I was totally watching Collateral in 2004, and obviously I was watching Spider-Man 2 because that did come out in 2004. But I was watching Collateral, The Village, Aviator, and Spider-Man 2. Yeah. Oh, and Kill Bill Volume 2. Oh my god! And then Man on Fire. I mean, look at that. You got Mean Girls, Dawn of the Dead. Oh, Cellular. That was fun. No one talks about
See,
Cellular.
2004 was a pretty good year for flicks.
Hellboy. Yeah, see? Plenty of movies not Spanglish, actually.
Yeah, I can see how that got lost in all the other movies.
Look, I blame Sean. He said it. It triggered a neuron. I can't help where it took me.
Oh, The Punisher. Yeah, the Thomas Jane one. I was also watching that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was terrible.
It's all right. It's all right.
No.
It's not
No.
terrible.
Well, yeah.
It was. I'm like,
It's-
yeah. I mean, like, it could have been better. Yeah, but I mean, I guess I had to take what I could get in 2004.
That's true.
Chronicles of Riddick was great. Am I just gonna do this? Am I just doing this? Am I just naming good movies I like? Dodgeball. Am I just? I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. Take me back to.
Well, now I'm wondering if these are all 2004. You're just pulling out movies out of your
No,
ass.
these are all. I literally looked at movies 2004. No, you know what? No, let's get back to Mel Brooks.
Okay, so Mel Brooks, Indian
Talking
Chief,
things.
or
I don't
just,
wanna do this.
or at least
Yeah.
the one we see with the most feathers, but not necessarily the chief, as we learned previously. And he's letting him go.
Now our host will tell us, what does Mel Brooks say to his head right hand chief? What does he say to him?
All right. Well, when he says
Big is in.
that means as long as you're healthy. So cop a walk, take off as long as you're healthy. Right? Then he says to the other Indians,
As big as Zane in deine Leben.
which means, have you ever seen such a thing?
Yeah.
And then the English,
They darker than us. Woof.
Oof.
So yeah, he is. This is definitely his first viewing of a black family. He's like, I don't know what to do with this. This is crazy. So
I'll say this, as inappropriate as the humor is, I still find it funny how the Indian chief turns it on turns us as the audience. We think he's doing this magnanimous thing. He's letting them go. He could tell they weren't part of the other wagon train. They were behind. They're all by themselves. He's going to let them walk. The reason he's letting them walk is like, whoo, they're darker than us.
Yeah, sort of. They're in the, and I picked up a couple different layers. So one is, maybe picking up on the racism of the white man, and that, well, these folks, we see that they're not traveling together. Their wagon is separated off behind the rest of the wagon train. They're going to be, they're darker than us. They're going to be discriminated against. They're going to be put down by the Europeans just as we are. And thinking on that level of the Indian character and the black characters, but also I think there's sort of a tie in there for the Jewish actor, and it comes in the entree to that is that he is the chief is speaking Yiddish, and kind of that relationship. Jews were very active in the civil rights movement for African Americans, blacks, for other minorities through the 50s, 60s and onwards, that there's ties between those communities in the 20th century. So
absolutely.
There's the ties there as well. So I felt, kind of the Yiddish brings that in, the ties between Jews and blacks. And then here you have just, we're all not European together, and we've got these folks coming over, and they're taking our land and they're using you to do it. So sort of we have a common foe between us. So, cop a walk, be healthy.
Yeah, and I think it's that attitude of, white man came across the sea and brought his pain and misery. And
wow, you're quoting Iron Maiden now.
Of course I am. Why wouldn't I? It fits perfectly.
I'm going to have to pull a clip now. That's awesome. Thanks, Walt.
You're welcome.
And you got to run the clearances. Right.
Now, 29 seconds.
It's time for us to run to the hills. Come on,
exactly.
Go.
Run for your life. I mean, that's what he's saying to these folks.
Yeah. As long as you're healthy, we'll let you go.
That's right.
Do you think if one of them had coughed, he would have changed his mind?
No, he had still rightly blamed the white man for that.
But isn't it?
Because we brought our
isn't
pain
part
and
of the
misery.
irony here of what Sean just said, which I totally agree with everything he said about these different layers of what's happening here, to actually then show that the Indians themselves showed a more racist attitude against a tribe of people that were blacker or darker than they were. Like just carrying on this 1974, what was being punched in the face, the idea that you would judge somebody based on skin color. You've got an entire group of people being subjugated by the white man to get their land, and yet they're okay saying almost something just as racist back to Bart and his family.
Right. Not that we should let these people go because, we shouldn't be killing these people and raiding their wagon trains and whatnot, but we're going to let them go because they're darker than us.
Right. I mean, it's such a wonderful bit of comedy. At the same time, it continues this through line of, look at, even this great Indian warrior is judging somebody based on the color of their skin. And it points continuously through comedy. Why would you do that? It makes no sense to do that. But it's done for comedic effect here. And we're going to actually get another joke about the white man doing everything they can to try to get rid of the Indians, only to put a black sheriff in charge. So this is going to be another recurring color joke later in the movie.
Yeah, and this works so well. I mean, this, being Jewish, and as I said previously, having older relatives who spoke Yiddish. When I was a little kid and knew none of the subtext and none of these other implications, just as a pure comedy, the contrast, the surprise, the playing against type, this, just of you don't expect. Yeah, a Native American, an Indian chief to ride down from the hills and be speaking Yiddish. So this is just a great scene from that point. And then through the years in education and learning about the Native Americans and Western expansion and everything else, and putting this scene and the couple lines that we have this minute in context, it's just as funny. It doesn't take away from the comedy. At least it doesn't for me. It adds to it. It's even funnier, and then it's even more on point to like, oh, they're making me laugh, and they're giving me something that I can think about afterwards. Yeah.
Very true.
So
I agree.
Just some of what I take away, and why I think, why I think Mel Brooks is such a great filmmaker, and particularly the collaborations with Gene Wilder are so wonderful, not just as comedies, but as they're meaty movies. They're movies you can really sink your teeth into, movies you can talk about 1 minute at a time, and you're not just going, oh, that's funny, that was a good joke. Although we're doing some of that, and I imagine there's a lot of that from the other minutes as well, but that you can, there's stuff to talk about from a filmmaking perspective. Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of layers with this. A well done satire should have all those kind of multiple layers taking place, and depending where you are in your maturity, and I think we both said this when you guys first came on last week, it wasn't like a snap your fingers and suddenly realize all the depth to it. It sort of slowly creeps up on you with age and wisdom and experience, the longer you live, the more interactions you have, the more you become more open to other ideas and realize maybe some of your own blinders coming off. You see these textures, and that's why I think this movie continues to survive today.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that noise?
I honestly you guys have a lot of good notes from that one. I did not have as many, and I'm just like going, wow, this is good. These guys.
I'm gonna isolate that noise. That to me is the sound of the eye roll.
All right. Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Well, if anything, you cut back to Gene Wilder. That's me going like, man, I'm just gonna take a nap. You're gonna talk a big talk. I'm just gonna take a nap.
They're using big words and stuff.
I like to keep my audience riveted.
Yes, I was going to say,
Like to
he is
keep
basically
riveted.
like Sheriff Bart, or like Gene Wilder is right now.
Well, all right, I'll play Sheriff Bart. I guess Sean and I are Sheriff Bart. We're the ones monologuing here.
Well, but I'm going to say that about Sheriff Bart putting Waco Kid to sleep. Did he want to do that? Was he kind of like? No, I'm serious. Was he kind of like? I feel like I'm done, kind of talking to him. He's drunk. I'm actually going to tell my story slow and draw it out to purposely just kind of put him to sleep. So I'm done with him. You know.
See, I saw it the exact opposite. The comedy for me was he's telling this pretty gripping tale, this story of this wagon train coming under a Sioux Nation attack, and that they're the only lone survivors, and for some reason, the head of this Indian tribe lets them go.
True.
I'd be on the edge of my seat. And I think the comedy is Gene Wilder could not care less. He's like, all right, whatever, I'm done.
Yeah, and the delivery we've talked about it, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it, plenty of times for other things. Just the way Cleavon Little breaks the fourth wall. He looks out to us as the audience and gives us that eye.
And the rest is history. Impressed? Always like to keep my audience riveted.
It's one of those things I can't imagine anyone else delivering that line. And we talked about, and you've talked about Richard Pryor, and certainly we're going to get later on down the road great collaborations between Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. So he will get on screen with Gene at some point in the future, even if he didn't make it into this film. But it'd be a different film and a different delivery, and lines like this that just, this is just the right actor delivering the right line the right way. It doesn't take me out of the movie the way, sometimes when movies break the fourth wall, it doesn't always work, but when used judiciously, it's not something that this movie does very often, but in lines like this, just, and like you're saying that this is a great story. This is a riveting tale. Oh my God, the Sioux Nation, and how are you going to escape, and what happens? And well, apparently this guy didn't agree. It put him to sleep.
It's funny you say about the breaking the fourth wall. We've been keeping track. This is the sixth instance so far of addressing the audience directly. 6 times in about 40 minutes.
Wow, I would not have guessed that. I'll have to go back and keep count. Well, I'll have to listen to the podcast. And figure out. Wow.
Yes, you've got Hedley Lamar does it a couple of times. Bart has done it the most so far.
All right.
But you've got the old woman in the street. She says, "Have you ever seen such cruelty?" That was also directed right to the audience.
Okay.
So if you go back, see, again, these are little things that's why it works. It's working because until you point it out, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like it works in this movie.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
If we said, "Oh, Jesus, another fourth wall," we'd be like, okay, obviously it's not working. We don't even realize how often it's used in this movie.
I agree with you. I think that's one of the reasons why we know it works so well, is because we're not sitting here going, well, there they go again.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. And maybe it's because we're being told a tale of the Old West that we don't mind the storyteller acknowledging us out in the audience.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and this is, we know the history, we know about Western expansion, but we don't know this specific story. We don't know, the travels of, of little Bart's family. So, so we're listening along with, with Jim And, we're just part of that audience for, this origin story or this tale of his family coming to the West. And so, So when he addresses us, it feels very natural.
And it's a great line. And as we've all already parodied it a few times, I think we all use this line in our everyday lives. Whenever we realize a joke has failed or somebody's not paying attention, you just throw that out there because the irony of always wanting to keep my audience riveted.
My next note is obviously the next scene, so I don't know if you want to intro the scene and then I'll have it down or...
No. Well, we could just go right into it.
Okay.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Just go ahead and knock on that barbed wire.
I wanted to ask the first feeling I got when we pan across the horses, the sign, and then the men eating. In a weird way, I felt like this was kind of an allusion to like the though this is obviously in the American West of the, I don't know this is like 1890, 1900?
It's 1874.
1874, even older. Okay. So it's even older than that. That it felt like this was almost an homage to those 1930s Norman Rockwell construction worker sites. Like that's the first. It's so funny. It's like the construction worker. They're all sitting around with their box lunches. Like that's the first vibe I got was
with like the lunch pails.
And like where instead of horses, it would be actual construction equipment and the administrative signs. Like this is like, this is the fence of a construction site or something. Like, these are the men at work. And then we cut to them like, eating beans, burping and farting. I feel like I felt like that was what Mel Brooks was trying to allude to, was like, oh, look at these are some hard men at work and they're taking a moment to eat. And then we cut to the comedy. I want to know what your take on that is.
Well, no, I think you've set it up. I think this scene and the way they chose to add it here, according to the script, this was actually going to happen right after the sheriff was showing up in town. We weren't even going to get the town hall meeting. It was supposed to, according to the script, Bart shows up, he puts himself under arrest or mugs himself, and instead of going straight to the town hall, it was supposed to go straight to the, hey, I heard there's a new sheriff in town. Anybody want to go kill him? And then we were going to cut back and see that the town was having a meeting saying we need to complain to the governor about him being the biggest asshole in government. I love how we do it this way in the film, the theatrical release we have, because if you remember, I commented about the ballad of, or the theme song of Blazing Saddles being done in a more symphonic way to kind of give that sense when that wagon train is first shown. Mm-hmm. You almost sense this grand, almost, John Ford kind of movie. Mm-hmm. And so you had all of these sweeping horns and the oboes. Now all of a sudden we're here with like a Jew harp and a harmonica. And so you're getting the exact polar opposite of yet still a Western motif, but just it's told from a different musical perspective. And instead of being in the day, it's at night. Instead of being this grandiose, wide, panoramic scene, here we are up close with just very tight medium shots. So I think it's a great counterpoint to each other to show the heroic side of where Bart came from. And even though they fell under attack, it's a heroic story. And here we've got a bunch of guys stuck around a campfire eating beans together.
And what are all these guys' profession? Are they all bandits? Are they all hired gunmen? What are we like? What's the composition here?
Well, and we're going to get into more of it as we go along. But if you, they all work, at least at the beginning of the movie, on the railroad. Now, I don't know if they were security for the railroad, if these were the modern day overseers to make sure people are doing the work on the railroad. Okay. But then Taggart, who's the lead, and obviously under the thumb of Hedley Lamar, has turned them all into the group that kept terrorizing Rockridge. So I think they're hired muscle in whatever capacity.
Okay. Because it's like they don't sound exactly like bandits. They sound like hired men that do what they want kind of on their own time. Like I'm saying, it's like I'm trying.
They're hired goons.
They're hired goons. They're not, like I said, they're not like renegades. Like they're not being chased by marshals. They're almost employed as security.
Right. Yeah, some of them are almost certainly private security for the railroad or sort of Hedy Lamar's men. I mean, I guess one of them's got to be a cook. Someone makes all those beans.
Could be. You know, that actually gets me to something I did add in my notes here because you guys heard the term chuck wagon, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know up until 1866 there was no such thing?
I did not know that.
It was the invention of a cattleman by the name of Charles Goodnight. And since his name was Charles, and he came up with this cool wagon that would have a fold-down door that could be used as a counter, and you could store all of your goods that you could then make meals on the cattle drive, they started calling that design the Chuck Wagon or Chuck's Wagon because it was Charles Goodnight.
I did not know that.
Wow, we had a custom built chuck wagon for our Boy Scout troop. We had essentially it was a big wooden box that had like two big heavy rope handles on it, and then it had I don't know who, like it was before my time, but it had custom legs on it, and then you put the legs, and then you had a double fold down chuck wagon to work off of, and then we would have that under the tarp of the in the kitchen area when we went camping.
Well, the coolest thing about, because there's so many things that are anachronistic in this movie on purpose, this is actually 100% historically correct. You would have had meals like this prepared around a campfire thanks to the invention of the chuck wagon.
Well, except for one small thing, and I'll bring up this question. If these guys were building the railroad, they would probably need to move along the path of the railroad every couple of days or so. How would they set up, or why would they set up barbed wire fences if they were going to be basically bugging out every couple of days or so?
Yeah, because you're right. That because you had to because that let's see, they're probably it's connected. Let's see. Those posts you'd have to then dig the post for the wire, because you could hypothetically have the wire wrapped around these cords already. All you have to do is just get your work gloves out and then do it. But you're right, you still have to dig the stakes in.
Yeah, and you really could just, tie the horses, to trees or wagons or whatever you needed to. But hauling all those fence posts and
or the what do you call them? The pylon things, the little metal sticks. You just hammer on, bing, 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 hit a couple of those pylon things to the ground, and then you lash the horses to them.
Right. Well, and otherwise, you are hauling a whole fence system along with you everywhere you go.
Well, Walt, it's obvious you didn't read the sign, because these are the administrative personnel, and they needed a private place that could keep them safe away from all of the other folks out there on the railroad.
A kind of a pen, if you will.
Well, it's not just to keep the horses in, but it's also to protect them. So you got to knock on the barbed wire before entering.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. I mean, what could possibly go wrong when you knock on barbed wire? And, of course, everybody would hear you when you knocked on barbed wire.
You brought up something interesting, though. I don't know how fast railroad ties and rail lines were put in on a daily basis. I mean, that was grueling manual labor. You could set up a temporary camp that might be there for 3 or 4 weeks before you say, okay, it's getting a little too far to ride to the railroad workers, which would have been camped out along the railroad. It never even bothered me that they would have their own sort of a semi-permanent encampment for them to come back to.
That was sort of the plot of Hell on Wheels, was about that. It was just that, like, all these mixed gray hatted people, no one was really clean cut, and everyone was out to try and, either go west and make some quick money, working around the railroad. Yeah.
Well, and I could see you'd have, obviously, so as the railroad gets built, if you're on the forefront of construction, that leading edge is going to constantly move. But I imagine there's some more permanent, administrative offices that set up at the points where the rail stations are eventually going to be. That the train will stop at certain points along the way. So it would make sense you'd have a more permanent, established offices, administrative personnel, and so forth at those points along the way. And those wouldn't move. Those would be more permanent structures.
And Walt, let's remember what we talked about with the missing surveyors, because we knew that there were surveyors at some point that knew there was quicksand, but we don't know where they went. So that, maybe that's where all the surveyors go back to when they're done with their day.
So more permanent base camp, I guess.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I'll buy that.
I want to point something out on this slow dolly shot as we're going along the barbed wire and the horses, and we see the men sort of in the background. Pay attention to the fact that one of the cowboys back there does not have his hat on at his meet.
Right.
And that is actually the actor Burton Gilliam, who plays Lyle. And we'll have a great story about that tomorrow, about how, once again, not being an experienced film set actor, this was only the second time he'd ever been on something, he forgot to put his hat on in a scene. And once they filmed the one scene, he could never put his hat back on again.
Well, continuity, yeah, for editing and so forth. So
exactly.
Gosh.
That's funny. Yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. Yeah, the one guy without the hat.
He's the only guy who doesn't have a hat on. And he said, he kept telling Mel, he goes, can I put my hat back on? He goes, no, you didn't have it on. We can't have it on anymore. So it was right. He had let it go behind his head. It was dangling from the rope, or the little what do you call it? The chin strap, I guess. It's all right. I think everybody, we've described it. We know what we're talking about. The little loop of little cord. Usually it's sort of a leather cord that's loose fitting that hangs from both sides of the hat, that just in case you're riding really fast or you have to get giddy up or a big gust of wind, if your hat blows off your head, the little bit of string is wrapped around your neck so that way it won't go too far.
Yeah, it lets it hang around your neck. And so the hat cord.
Hat cord.
Yeah, there we go. So we'll dive deeper into that starting tomorrow. But I wanted to point out that it's actually even in this dolly shot that shows them sort of in a very soft focus in the background as we are being, we're establishing this a campground for administrative personnel.
Yeah, and we established that Burton does have hat head.
Well,
he does.
Not necessarily an Old West style haircut, more like a 70s style haircut.
Yeah.
Looks like one of the monkeys.
And another note of historical accuracy here, we see the barbed wire named as such on the sign that says, knock on the barbed wire, knock on barbed wire before entering. The first patent in the U.S. for barbed wire was issued in 1867. And there was a follow-up patent granted for improvements and modifications in 1874. But so barbed wire was something that would have been relatively new technology, but it certainly did exist during this time. And so so it's accurate that these folks might have been using it.
Excellent. So they've got a cooking wagon where they would have been able to prepare a meal like this, because the chuck wagon had come out in 66 and the barbed wire had come out in 67. So perfectly okay for the use in this scene.
So no one say
Excellent.
Mel Brooks doesn't do his homework. Either that or he just got lucky.
Yeah, just blind squirrel and a nut and all that kind of stuff.
Well, oddly, there are more things that we keep finding in this movie that are accurate. So somebody was doing something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back to what I keep saying, and I don't want to. If we ever got Mel Brooks and he went back and started to listen, he's going to start hearing like the same comment. But I feel like his best work was a lot of the earlier work, and I wonder if it's because when you're younger, when you're less proven, you've got less success under your belt, you tend to work a lot harder. You put in that little bit of extra effort. Not to say that he didn't work hard later. I mean, he's still 92, 93 years old, and he's still churning out work. But it just feels like that little bit of extra tightness, that little bit of extra polish is more noticeable on his earlier films rather than his later ones.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he had more things he wanted to say. And then he's like, I'm going to make these later films more for the fun than to make any, big satirical statement.
True. Yeah, I think these were making big statements, and then later he was saying, you know what, I helped bring about the style of comedy that allowed movies like Airplane to exist. Now I want to do my own version of Airplane, but I'm just going to set it in a different, I'm going to do Robin Hood Men in Tights, or I'm going to do Spaceballs.
Yeah, because like Men in Tights, like, he poked fun at like medieval culture, but it's like, that's medieval culture. Like at the 1500s, like who, like no one's around to like think about that.
But it's more of a mockery of the Robin Hood with Kevin Costner. I mean, if you've never seen Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, you wouldn't realize why there's so many similarities to those two movies and what he's parodying.
No, you're right. I'd never seen the Kevin Costner one because I'm just like, I feel like the Robin Hood Men in Tights is objectively better in both entertainment and swiftness. Like I feel like
Yes,
a better movie.
it just moved. Like he's like I'm gonna make you laugh, and also I'm gonna move the story along, and you're also gonna remember all the characters. I mean, God, that Little John bit, right? Was his name catches the arrow because he's blind, but he catches the arrow.
Blinken.
Like, oh my God, you caught the arrow. He's like, I heard it from a mile away. Really? Wait, who? What? Who said that?
Who said that?
I love that bit. Or just Dave Chappelle putting just air in his Jordans. Hold on, man, I'm blowing air.
When they're gonna have that fight over that little creek, he goes, "This ain't the Mississippi."
Yeah. Perfect.
Well,
Wow. Well, we've taken shots at Kevin Costner in 2 straight episodes.
you should feel good about yourself, Walt.
This is awesome.
You can sleep
can't
well
wait to
tonight.
hear these.
Saying to yourself, "Job well done."
All right. Well, Kevin, if you'd like to defend yourself, contact the boys at Wilder Ride.
Oh,
I'm
exactly.
sure they'd love to have you on, and then
just
they'll
saying,
be suddenly very polite.
Kevin Costner takes his Western so seriously, and it's just like, dude, I'm tired of it, man. Can you do something else?
All right, Dave, I have an actual question. Have you seriously never seen Robin Hood, the Kevin Costner Robin Hood?
No, why? Why would I want to do that?
Okay, because you love Men in Tights.
Yeah, because
So-
it's fun.
You should go watch it then.
No,
But
No.
he's seen the better version of
you're
it.
fine.
better version.
You're
You're going to
fine.
see so many more jokes once you see the other one. It's like steam escaping.
It's like, oh man, I don't know. Maybe I'll like see if there's a riff tracks of it or something.
It's
I don't
2
know.
hours and 23 minutes of Kevin
God.
Costner garbage.
and they repurpose the what do you call it? The sheriff. What they call it?
The Sheriff
Woods,
of Nottingham?
What's the woods called? Is there a name?
Sherwood Forest.
It's Sherwood Forest.
Sherwood Forest.
All the action figures were repurposed Endor sets because Kenner still had all the plastic molds and didn't sell enough. I heard about this. They didn't sell enough Ewok stuff because it's Ewok stuff. So they were repurposing stuff. And
that's why Little John is so little.
Yeah,
He's actually
I remember it because see, this is why.
Why
Honestly,
does he
this
look
is
like
why.
Wicket?
I'm honest to God, not kidding. Is that as a kid, every time you went to Toys R Us and you bought toys, a lot of Kenner stuff, you got the Kenner catalog, and the Kenner catalog had like every toy of every movie they had a license to. So I saw Alien, I saw Predator, I saw Jurassic, I believe in Jurassic Park. And I remember and Terminator is big. And I remember near the end they always had the Robin Hood movie, and I was like, this is not a kid's movie. Like I knew as a kid, like this is not a kid's movie because the only Robin Hood movies I'm watching are the animated Fox one and the Men in Tights one. So I knew this is an adult movie that because like the trailer always looked serious and the movie looked like actiony, but not like kid action, like because us kids are watching we're watching Three Ninjas and Home Alone, so we're like it's one of those things where you're like that's adult. Like that's adult movies, like where it's just gonna be boring adult stuff, That's like when I found one of my Pete and Pete tapes when I was recording Pete Stock. My parents over recorded Lady Hawk, and I was like, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that?"
That's
And
a good
that's like-
movie.
But Pete and Pete's better.
No, better than Lady Hawk.
Pete and Pete is timeless.
All right. Well, I will probably never convince you to see the Kevin Costner Robin Hood. I'm going to have to painfully admit this for our guests and and in perpetuity as long as this podcast exists. It is a guilty pleasure of the wife and I. She loves that movie. I don't mind that movie. There's a lot worse out there to watch, and so when there's nothing else going on, we will put that on. In fact, I even got it on Blu-ray when they re-released it so we could have it on our 4K TV.
Well, if you're going to watch Kevin Costner, go watch The Untouchables.
Untouchables. Thank you.
Awesome movie.
Look, I knew you were going to say it before the end sentence. I was like, that's a Kevin Costner movie that I can watch because his supporting cast is more fun than him. Because he just plays the boring Elliot Ness. And then you have Sean Connery, and you have Alfred Molina, and you have Andy Garcia. And they're the ones you want to watch. Like, you don't care about Kevin Costner.
I was trying to give Kevin Costner some credit, but you're right. That's the reason that movie's good. It isn't because of him.
Alfred Molina, or is it Andy Garcia? Who's in the damn? Who's it? Is it
Andy Garcia, yeah.
It's not Alfred Molina's not in that one, right? No, I'm thinking of something else.
Look, I will give you the top 5 Costner movies as far as I'm concerned, and it is in this order: Dances with Wolves, Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, Untouchables, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Anything after that, I don't really care.
You know, I never even seen JFK. I don't know. Is that good?
You know what? It's actually filmed very well, but it's your typical, like, let's go take a conspiracy theory and put as many other conspiracies as we can and weave it all together. It's well done, but I don't know how historically accurate all of it really is.
I actually did enjoy, I mean, for what it was worth, I did enjoy his take as Old Man Kent in Man of Steel. I don't like the fact that he died because it's like Zack Snyder wants to, make his own movie. And it's just like, okay, well, thanks.
Oh, so you're touching a hot button with us about why we've been watching the DC characters just flounder on screen, literally, versus what the Marvel Universe did. And
I just wish they didn't kill, like, it's like, you have Ma Kent, but it's like, can you just have both Kents? Can you just, like, Zack Snyder, just knock it off. That's all I ask. Stop, knock it off.
I think he's at the root of the problem with half of the, outside of Wonder Woman that somehow survived Zack Snyder's producing, and Aquaman that apparently is a result of Zack Snyder having been told you're done. Those are the only 2 movies that apparently have done well for DC.
Yeah,
they may have made money, but they're crap.
Well, and even when Aquaman came out, the comment I kept hearing was, it's good for a DC movie.
Yeah, that's bad when you have to say that as your qualifier.
Yeah. Nobody was saying, hey, this is a good movie. I really enjoyed it. It was always, it was better than...
Wow.
Yeah.
It's good for a DC movie.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I guess that's what it just comes down to. There's just nothing in the Kevin Costner filmography I need to see. There's just nothing here. Even 3,000 Miles of Graceland, if you took out Kevin Costner and you put in Nicolas Cage, been a way better movie.
How sad is that to say?
Well, because Nick Cage is definitely into Elvis,
Oh, yeah,
And so if you had, I actually, in my head, I actually imagined it was Nick Cage instead of.
I guess if you're just tainted, you'll always be. But I think he's got a lot of good movies around a lot of bad movies. I mean, I love Silverado. I think that is a great updated modern Western, written by Lawrence Kasdan, written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan. That's, I think, is fantastic, but it's not just a Costner movie. He just happens to be in it. He's not the star vehicle.
I don't know. I'm more of a Tombstone guy.
I love Tombstone.
Well,
if Tombstone is not Silverado.
And Silverado next to each other, Tombstone just blows it off the screen.
Yeah.
When's the last time you watched Silverado?
I don't know. When I thought that it might be good.
Bless America.
The week it came out.
Or technically one of my favorite westerns is Last Man Standing, which is essentially them doing the what's the original Japanese Shogun
Lone
story?
Wolf. It was wasn't it the thing for Lone Wolf and Cub about the masterless samurai?
It's what's it called? It's Fistful of Dollars. It's updated by the dude Bruce Willis. And it's two gangs in a town, and then the guy comes in and tries to play both gangs against each other. It's that old story.
Wait a minute. Maybe I'm thinking of something else then.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have seen the Bruce Willis movie. I thought it was based off of an Oriental story, though.
I thought it. Yeah, it is. It's essentially it's Bruce Willis is Last Man Standing is essentially playing the same Clint Eastwood character of, I believe, Fistful of Dollars, which is the updated version of like that one Shogun story where it's like the samurai comes into town and plays both clans against each other.
Yeah.
Some listeners definitely yelling at their radio right now. But anyway, that's me in westerns. It's like I don't watch a lot of them. I got a few favorites. But this is fun. But Blazing Saddles, definitely fun. There's jokes here that's outside just being western. So fun can be had. There
All right.
you go. Laying it on the table.
I'm stuck on looking up. It is a credited remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo.
Yo, Jimbo! Thank you.
Yo, Jimbo.
Hey, yo, Jimbo, what's up? No, Yojimbo. Sorry. I must be getting tired. Because I thought that was fucking funny and nobody laughed.
It was funny. Last man standing.
That's what I'm saying with Bruce Willis. That is the, like, they did it as a prohibition update to that story.
All right. Well, let's go. Let's
Oh,
go ahead and put a bow on.
We're clearly, the beans have gotten to our heads.
Let's put a bow on this one, and we are going to be bidding you guys a farewell, having joined us for 3 episodes of season 2. Let's go to you first, Sean, and let's tell the audience a little bit more about where you've been, what you've done, and maybe what you've got coming up.
Maybe. So where I've been around a few different movies. I've been around This is Spinal Tap with my great co-host Heidi Bennett at spinaltapminute.com. And I've been to Punxsutawney, PA with Dave Pallas. And we covered the movie Groundhog Day 1 minute at a time. You can find that at Groundhog Minute. And let's see. I've also been to Mime Town on my show 5 Minutes of Mime, where it's a short podcast. Each episode is 5 minutes, and I talk about mime and silent performance and how mime plays a part in acting and dancing and other arts. And we talk about a bunch of stuff there. And that's at 5minutesofmime.com. And, I do have something coming up. Don't have a title or specific date. So I guess keep an eye on, I mentioned it previously, but sort of my home base is catandshawn.org. And that's where I link to all my podcasts. I'll link to this. I link to my guest appearances. And I'll probably make an announcement soon. I'm working on something with my brother, Brian German. You probably remember him from, he was a guest on Groundhog Minute. We also covered the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles 1 day at a time this previous Thanksgiving. We're working on a different movie podcast. It won't be minute by minute like this, but it'll be something movie related. And keep an eye on catandshawn.org for all my latest guest appearances and announcement on podcasts yet to come.
Excellent. And Dave, what about you? Where have you been and where are you going?
Well, I'm always in Champion City, home of the Mystery Men, where I do 5 minutes of mystery, where we talk all about that Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, Greg Kinnear, classic comic book movie that's been overlooked ever since. I think it's everyone who like loved Avengers, loved team up movies, go watch Mystery Men. It came out what, 20 years ago now. Isn't that insane? 20 years ago. And you can see the actual movie that All Star was written for, not Shrek. So I'm also there to set that record straight too. And
nicely done.
And now I want to have now that I have him on mic recorded, Sean, that idea that I had for the next around the holidays. Are you still into that? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I won't say it now. We'll make a plan. We actually have to actually organize it. So I mentioned it. Okay, good. All right, good. So that's something that people can look forward to later in the year. Okay. We haven't.
And you mean like the Christmas holidays?
Yeah, around those holidays. Yeah, we're Sean and I we're working on something, and we have no plans, like no actual like what we're gonna do about it. How we're gonna. I doubt it's going to be minute by minute, but it's going to be something that will be just as fun as all those other holiday classics that Sean's been working on.
Excellent. You know, it's fun to sometimes step out of the minute by minute format and try some other things from time to time. And I know Walt and we did that with our Patreon content. So Walt, why don't we let the good audience know where if they love what we talk about, but they want to talk about other movies besides Gene Wilder movies. I don't know why you would, but sure, there are other movies out there. Where can they go?
Well, the best place to go for that is, and the only place to go for that actually, is patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. And you're going to find our coverage of Poltergeist and our coverage of Christmas Vacation. And also what you don't want to miss is our interview that we had with Beverly D'Angelo, which is available either on Patreon or on iTunes and all your other podcatchers. And listen to her talk for a couple minutes about Christmas Vacation and a lot about all kinds of other stuff.
Always a lot of stuff, a lot of fun. And by the way, that Patreon content will continue to grow over the course of the many seasons of the Wilder Ride. So depending when you're stumbling upon this, there may be a lot more already in there. So it's a cool destination to hear a discussion about some of the movies. Sometimes our audience, our listeners group picks the movies we decide to do in the Patreon content area.
Yeah, and be sure to help us out a little bit if you are enjoying what you're hearing. If you could come on board for $1 a month, or you want to go a little bit higher and get some other stuff, including some of the content there, that would really help us out a lot to cover some of our costs.
Excellent. So come on back tomorrow, folks. We're going to bid Sean and Dave a fond farewell. But coming in tomorrow, we've got a couple of folks from a local radio station who also have a podcast. We're going to be joined by Tim Andrews and Jeff Lieboff. Tim Andrews can be heard on the Von Hessler Doctrine on AM 750 and FM 95.5 in Atlanta. That's WSB. But you can also find him on the very adult but very funny cultural, I guess they do cultural commentary, and they look at entertainment and what's going on in the news as well, but it's called Radio Labyrinth, and I would highly suggest checking out that podcast. They'll be joining us for a couple of minutes coming up tomorrow. So, Dave, Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us on around the campfire.
Excellent. And tomorrow we're going to start off, we had belching, so to go with it, we're going to start with some farting, and we're going to end with, why don't we give him to Mongo? And we're going to be introduced to yet another character, Mongo. But you got to come back tomorrow for this, The Wilder Ride.
All right, well, I'm headed off to eat my plate of beans and bread.
Vegason, take off.
Couple walk, take off.
Oh, this is riveting.
That's all right.
It's not the Baleo, right? It's
no, that's the tie. What do you call that? It's not really a chin. I guess it is. It's just to keep the hat from blowing away. The strap that keeps the hat from blowing away. We'll just.
Oh, I know one name for it is the stampede string.
The stampede.
Yeah, that's kind of used around rodeos. There's another name for it, and I am drawing a complete blank. And I know I'm usually the resident hat expert, but I can't.
You are letting us show down.
Man, stampede string is the one I keep going back to, but I know that's not what they always call it.